Welcome back, everyone, to Vox Markets. My name is Paul Hill. I'm delighted today to be able to speak to Paul Pagano, CEO of Lunglife AI, a developer of next-generation diagnostics that are used to identify and treat early-stage lung cancer. So welcome, Paul.
Great to see you, Paul. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, lots been happening since we last spoke, not least today's positive first half results. But before we sort of dig into the details, I don't suppose you could quickly remind investors of what the company's technology does, how it does it, and what sort of key USPs?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're focused on lung cancer. It's the #1 cancer killer, not only in the US, but across the world. And we're focused on early detection. So all early detection is centered around the CT scanner. It's basically a three-dimensional X-ray of the chest. And it's very sensitive at picking up lung nodules. These are little spots on the lung that shouldn't be there. And it's a great source of confusion for physicians. And that's why they're called indeterminate nodules. They could be lung cancer. It could be scar tissue, an infection, a number of things. And the tools at the physician's disposal really aren't that good. And so we've developed a blood test called the LungLB. It looks at circulating tumor cells, and it gives the physician additional information to understand what that lung nodule is. You know, if it's cancer, go and work it up, have it removed. And then if it's not cancer, don't do any invasive procedures.
And what's the danger that if you have sort of like you do a CT scan, and I understand there's about 5 million or so of these things done every single year of US of people, and then you get sort of, I don't know, 1.6 million odd people who get these, you know, indeterminate lung nodules. What's the sort of discrimination with this CT scan in terms of sort of getting false readings, false positives? Because if a doctor actually gets a positive, he wants to be able to know whether, one, he can rely on it, and two, whether he needs to do anything. Because last thing I'd want as a patient for him to sort of like start doing a biopsy on me.
Yeah, so the false positives from the CT scan are pretty common. Physicians are getting better at evaluating it. But right now, around 40% of patients that are sent off to get that invasive biopsy don't have lung cancer. And so they didn't need the biopsy in the first place. And then when you combine that with the fact that 1 in 5 biopsies returns an adverse event, and these things aren't minor, it could be infection, it could be a collapsed lung, it could be hemorrhaging. There have even been people that have died as a result of a lung biopsy. We're putting a lot of people in harm's way for no good reason.
And what's the sort of the improvement in the accuracy of the LungLB test compared to the sort of the 40% sort of like false positives that the CT scan give over?
Yeah, so your standard of care right now is around what's called a 60% positive predictive value. That means if the physician thinks that it's cancer, 60% of the time it will be. Hence, 40% of the time they're biopsying people that don't have lung cancer. Now, our technology has an 89% positive predictive value. What that means is if you get a positive LungLB test result, and we believe it's cancer, 89% of the time it will be cancer. So that means instead of 40% of patients getting an unnecessary biopsy, we can reduce that by nearly 75% potentially.
And how come you got such great accuracy there? Is it? I understand you use circulating tumor cells. Can you just take us through why that is such a sort of step change in technology?
You know, I think that's why the test performed so well in our pilot study, is because circulating tumor cells are the ideal biomarker for early stage lung cancer. As it turns out, lung cancer metastasizes or spreads very early on. So this is the process of a cancer moving from the lungs to other parts of the body. And the way it does that is through circulating tumor cells that enter the bloodstream, and they lodge in the liver, the bone, other places. And so this happens early stage. This was my work at UCLA. A lot of other folks have been finding this same occurrence. And so, you know, while others are using cell-free DNA or proteins, CTCs are really abundant in early stage lung cancer. So we're matching the biomarker to the proper stage of the disease. And I think that's why it works so well.
And given that the sort of the predictive positive value is so high on it, is it possible now? If it's all sort of rubber stamped in the sort of validation test, and we'll come on to that in a moment, but if it all sort of comes through, then is it possible to use these for sort of like, effectively screening at the front end for sort of like, if a patient goes in there, he's been a smoker, to the doctor, and the doctor says, actually, you've got a bad cough, you haven't got rid of it for about 2 or 3 months, I'm not sure what it is, I'm a bit worried. So, would that ultimately, could that be an opportunity? Or
it's something that we get asked about quite a bit. We're methodical. We're science-based organizations. So, indeterminate nodules are the first step, because that is a big problem in early lung cancer detection. But I think, the natural progression of this is to see how early we can use it. So right now, somebody with an indeterminate nodule has a relatively high risk of having lung cancer,
right.
Maybe on the order of 30 to 40%. In the screening setting, you might be down to 1%. So you need sort of a different test metric, if you will. But that is something that we imagine this could be used for in the future.
Okay, and so just looking at solely at the sort of the CT scans, and we get sort of like 1.6 million people who come through with sort of like indeterminate lung nodules. What sort of like market, total addressable market would that sort of like be interpreted or translate into?
In the US alone, we estimate that there's around 1.5 million indeterminate nodules detected every single year. This is in addition to nodules that are found through lung cancer screening programs. So those nodules are really just found by accident. You're getting a CT scan for a completely different reason, to maybe look at your heart function, or maybe if there was something wrong with your vertebrae in your neck, and they accidentally see a nodule in your lungs that they end up working up. So between incidental nodules, those that are detected through a lung cancer screening program, and then also nodules that are detected incidentally, we think there could be on the order of 3 million LungLB tests every single year as our total addressable market, and just in the United States. And that number we also believe is going to increase. Historically, not many people have undergone a CT scan for early lung cancer detection. Only around 4% of those that are eligible. And there's some new estimates that are coming out that's now increased to around 6 or 7%. And as more physicians are becoming educated on the benefits of screening, more studies are coming out to support the benefits of screening, we feel that number is only going to increase. So the more CT scans you have, the more indeterminate nodules are found, there will be a much greater need for the LungLB test. Now, interestingly enough, COVID can also cause lung nodules, and we know how many people have been infected and continue to be infected with that virus. So, when physicians see an indeterminate nodule by CT scan, and they know that individual could have had an infection with COVID, it makes it all that more challenging to interpret. And again, that's where the LungLB test could come in, provide that additional information to help the physician choose the best path for the patient.
And when you wrap that in with the sort of the I know it's early days, but the anticipated price, the actual the LungLB test, what sort of like potential sort of like addressable market in dollar terms is it translate into?
Yeah, it really depends on what price the LungLB test is going to be offered at. Let's say if we go out at around $1,000 per test, which is within the value-based pricing range based on our health economics study, that could be on the order of a $3 billion market US.
Wow. Okay. Well, there's plenty to go out there, that's for sure. Now, just moving to all the hard work that your team has been doing on the validation. Can you just give us a sort of like a summary of what it's, how large it is, the sort of scale, the centers, and where we stand in terms of the progress?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're conducting our pivotal validation study, and it's based off of the strong results we had in our pilot study that was presented back in July. We're looking to enroll 425 study participants. This will be a multi-site study. So, during our last update, we had Mount Sinai, Bay Pines Veterans Affairs Hospital, and then MD Anderson Cancer Center, 3 great institutions. We've doubled that now at this point. UCLA is our most recent addition. And we are, in terms of enrollment, about where we expect to be at this time point. We have indicators that help us understand if we're on track, and UCLA being added this month was one of those. So we're happy with the progress, happy to continue to add additional sites. We have about 6 more that are in the hopper. These include both non-VA and VA hospitals. And the reason that I point that out, Paul, veterans are believed to be at higher risk for lung cancer than the civilian population because of what they've been exposed to during their times of service. So it's really important that we understand how the LungLB test works in that population, which is one of the reasons that we have so many Veterans Affairs hospitals participating in our study, which we're really delighted to have.
And just going forward on that validation study, what are the sort of the sort of key milestones, and when are you likely to have sort of like finish your enrollment, get all the test results in, analyze them, and then sort of publish the numbers and the data?
Yeah, so we believe that we're on track to have the 425 enrolled by the end of March in 2023. It usually takes around a few months to analyze the data and then compile the submission to the FDA. So we'd be looking to submit the data to the FDA June, July timeframe. In terms of publishing the data in a peer-reviewed journal, that could take as little as 3 months, but in my experience, it often takes between 6 and 9 months just to go through the peer review process, editorial process, et cetera, et cetera. The good thing for LungLB though is it's already CLIA approved. It's already considered what's called an LDT, or a laboratory developed tests. So we do not have to wait for FDA submission or authorization in order to commercialize the test. And so our plan is soon after analyzing those data in June-ish timeframe next year, that we'll have our initial launch of the LungLB test in our clinical utility studies. Again, it's not widely understood. FDA is a voluntary process for diagnostics companies. We're doing it because we believe the scientific rigor is going to provide confidence to all stakeholders. Payers like to see it, physicians, of course, it boosts confidence in patients as well. But it's strictly voluntary.
Wow, God, yeah, I didn't even know that either. So that's good. Just in terms of that utility test, what's the sort of key difference in objective between the sort of the pivotal validation study, which sort of like rubber stamps all the data and the results and the accuracy, and then the utility? Just for in layman terms, why are we doing a utility test afterwards?
Yeah, so the regulators, FDA, for example, and then for us, CLIA, and now New York State, they look for efficacy of the test. What are the percentages? How does the test perform? How often is it correct versus incorrect? That's what they're most interested in. And then they regulate us such that when we go out and market the test, we're not making claims that it performs at 99% accuracy when it really performs at 89%. That's what the pivotal validation study is for. It's to provide evidence to those regulators that our test performs at a level that we said it can. In terms of the utility study, that's something that payers are interested in. So Medicare is our largest public payer here in the United States. But then we also have a number of private insurers, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, et cetera. They're interested in seeing whether or not your test has utility. And what that means is, does it influence physician decision-making? When the physician orders the test, does it divert them from biopsy to go to a non-invasive follow-up, or vice versa? Does it help the patient live a longer, healthier life? And we believe it will if it avoids a lot of those unnecessary and dangerous biopsies. And then they'll also, as an added measure, look at costs. Is this technology adding costs to the healthcare system? Is it a zero-sum game, or does it help reduce costs? We've, in the process of doing a health economics study, have found that value-based pricing for LungLB is somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 a test. And that's at the point where it either doesn't add costs to the healthcare system, or it helps defray costs either from reduced unnecessary biopsies or reductions in delays in treatment by finding that cancer faster than what standard of care would.
Right, okay.
And so that's really the difference between utility and validation.
Yeah. Okay, and you had been a news flow just before about a month ago, which was the getting the permit for the New York state, etc. Can you just take us through sort of the significance and the importance of that in terms of the whole commercialization strategy?
Yeah, I was very pleased with how that turned out. One thing that I want to point out is that New York State has the most rigorous process out of all 50 states. It's likely one of the reasons why the FDA made them a third-party reviewer for certain FDA submissions. Not only are they reviewing our team's credentials, not only do they review our quality system, but they also approve the test itself. So with the LungLB, they looked at the raw data, they looked at the process data, and all of that goes into their decision-making process as to whether or not they'll issue you what's called a CLEP permit, Clinical Laboratory Evaluation Program permit. And what this permit allows you to do once granted is offer the test commercially to physicians in the state of New York. Importantly, with that New York State audit, they found 0 deficiencies when they came out to visit us and look at our quality system. That really speaks to LungLife's investment in having a first-in-class quality system.
Wow. Okay. And then just in terms of sort of like the getting the first revenues, you mentioned that you didn't need the FDA approval to actually to launch it. So it sounds as though if you don't get it in time, you can basically you'll start commercial. When would be that sort of like day one of sort of like commercializing it and selling the actual test?
Yeah, it's important that we're not at this point beholden to the FDA's timelines, because after submission, it could take 9, 12, 18 months for that approval to come through. They have a lot on their plates at the moment between wrapping things up with COVID and other ailments that are going on. So the fact that we're not beholden to them and we can start commercializing immediately is really beneficial to our company. We'll start the utility study as soon as possible, probably in June, July timeframe, early Q3 of next year. In terms of collecting revenue on that, sometimes there's the delay. So after a test is processed, you won't get paid immediately. It might take 30, 60, 90 days, especially with new technologies. We're laying the groundwork with that now with a lot of the clinical validation sites that we have in place. They end up being some of your early adopters in those clinical utility studies. So we're very hopeful that the VA hospitals, as well as some of the other non-VA sites, will participate in that utility study. And then we can recognize revenues more than likely towards the end of Q4 of next year. And those will be nominal revenues. Wow.
Okay. So you've got plenty on your plate there in the US, but just looking further afield, I mean, obviously you have lung cancer, and you get smokers around the world, particularly into where you got quite a few obviously in Europe, but Asia is absolutely masses with China, etc. So if everything goes well in the US, what would be the sort of the indicative timeline to start looking abroad to commercialize it?
Yeah, so we're very US focused at the moment. It is a fairly large market, but you're right, Paul, lung cancer isn't just a problem here. It's a problem globally. So, we have on the order of 150,000 deaths in the US alone, but there's over 1 million worldwide. Asia, China in particular, and Japan have high rates of lung cancer, as well as Europe. We have a partner in China right now that's taking their test through the Chinese FDA.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, that is a royalty-based stream for us. It's not large at this point because they're just starting out. But then, eventually, once we make our stake and our presence in the United States, we'd be looking to expand globally, likely with partners in Europe and in Asia.
Great. And obviously, you've got just over $10 million of net cash on the balance sheet, so you've got plenty of funding. But just indicatively, how long, or what sort of stage of commercialization will that take you through, or until? Yeah,
so that will take us certainly through the pivotal validation study, and that will help us initiate our clinical utility studies again, where our first revenues are expected, and a little bit beyond there. So we anticipate that our runway will go through sort of early 2024. That'll give us the indication that not only does the LungLB test work in the pivotal validation study, but physicians are interested in using it. So we'll start seeing some of that early clinical adoption from the utility studies.
Great. Okay. And if you had any, I mean, I know it's probably all a double-blinded study, but have you had any sort of like feedback from the doctors at all who are using it in the validation, or is it just you just can't get that type of reaction? Is it just too early days?
It is double blinded. We have a lot of, yeah, we do have a lot of physicians that express that they want to test this in utility studies and they need something like this for their patients. So that's incredibly reassuring to hear. The problem isn't just in the literature, it exists in real life. So
Yeah,
that's always validating, but yeah, it's double blinded. So the physician doesn't know the results of the LungLB test. We don't know the results of biopsies. It will be the third party that gets that information, processes the data. We want to do everything on the up and up, do it the right way. And this is the most rigorous way to run a validation study. And I think physicians will be appreciative of that.
Yeah, okay. And just finally then, sort of the news flow over the sort of next, you got your sort of like your test results, or say the end of the enrollment in 6 months' time in sort of March or so of next year. What's likely to be any news flow at all between now and then?
Yeah, this is a foundational year for reimbursement. So earlier this year, we announced that the American Medical Association granted us a PLA, or proprietary lab analysis code. This allows for physicians to bill LungLife's test very specifically, and nobody else can bill for it. We'll likely have a pricing determination for that later this year. That's where CMS will determine whether or not we go crosswalk, which is we get priced at the same price as an existing test on the fee schedule, or if we'll go down the gap fill route, which is usually a 9 to 12 month process. We've been planning for gap fill. That's traditionally what CMS will hand out to new tests. There's the potential that we go crosswalk, but since day one, David Anderson and I have been planning for gap fill. So look for potentially a preliminary determination in the next few weeks, and then a final determination on that towards the end of the year. We're also going to be submitting our peer-reviewed publication, our manuscript for peer review to an academic journal. So probably look out for that in the next 3 to 6 months. Again, depends on how quickly the reviews can come back. So those are the things probably on the immediate horizon for this year.
Great. Well, looking forward to that. So, well, thanks very much for your time, Paul. And as I say, I look forward to all the news and see the progress. And hopefully we'll have a sort of fully fledged sort of early stage lung cancer test in the hospitals in the US at the back end, or mid to the back end of next year.
That's right. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure catching up.
Thanks.